The job paid $11 an hour and came with a flashlight that didn't work. Mira took it anyway. Night security at the Hargrove Natural History Museum meant 12 hours of walking past dead things in glass boxes. Bones of animals that hadn't walked the earth in 60 million years. Stuffed birds with glass eyes that caught the emergency lighting and threw it back like tiny accusations. A whole floor of rocks that someone, at some point, had decided were important enough to lock behind velvet ropes. She liked it. She liked all of it. The silence had a weight to it, like a blanket thrown over the whole building after the last school group filed out, and the gift shop girl pulled the metal gate down with a sound like a zipper closing on the day. By 9 o'clock, Mira owned every hallway, every corner, every shadow the size of a parked car that pooled beneath the Tyrannosaurus skeleton on the second floor. Her shoes squeaked on the marble. She let them. Before this, she had been other things. A student, a daughter in good standing, a person who slept when it was dark and woke when it was light, and did not flinch when someone touched the back of her neck. That was the before Mira, the one her mother still asked about on the phone, in a voice stretched thin with trying. The museum didn't ask about before Mira. The museum just wanted someone to walk its bones at night. A perfect arrangement. She was on her third lap of the West Wing, Thursday, first week of October, when she heard the cough. It came from the Hall of African Mammals, a dry, short sound, the kind of cough a person makes when they've been holding still too long, and the dust gets brave. Mira stopped. Her hand went to the radio on her belt. Her fingers stayed there, resting, not pressing. She had a system for sounds. Pipes groaning meant the heating was on. A thud from the basement meant the furnace was being dramatic. A scraping sound from the roof meant raccoons. And she was to call Hector for maintenance, not deal with it herself, because the last guard who went up there came back down missing a shoe and most of his pride. A cough meant none of those things. She walked into the hall. The African mammals stood in their frozen poses behind the glass. The lions mid-stalk, the elephants mid-stride, all of them caught in the middle of doing something they would never finish. Mira moved her useless flashlight in a wide arc anyway, because it felt like the thing a guard should do, and the feeling of doing the right thing was sometimes enough, even when the tool was garbage. Nothing. Glass eyes, fake grass, the painted savanna backdrop that looked incredible from 20 feet away, and like a middle school art project up close. She almost left. Then the zebra moved. Not the stuffed one. The one behind the stuffed one. A shape, half hidden by the diorama's back panel, pressed against the emergency exit door, that Mira knew for a fact had been alarmed since 2011. She dropped the flashlight. It hit the marble and rolled, and the sound was so loud in that silence that it might as well have been a gunshot, and the shape behind the zebra made a noise. Not a cough this time, but a gasp, short and high, the kind that comes from a throat that hasn't spoken to anyone in a while. "Come out," Mira said. Her voice was steady. She was good at steady. She had practiced steady in bathrooms and waiting rooms, and on one terrible Tuesday in a courtroom, where the wood of the witness stand had a scratch shaped like the letter J, and she had stared at that scratch for 45 minutes instead of at the man sitting 12 feet to her left. She was thinking about the scratch now. She could feel it under her thumbnail, a groove in wood that didn't belong to this moment, this building, this year. She blinked. She pressed the thought down with both hands, the way you press a suitcase shut when you've packed too much and the zipper won't catch. "I can see you," she said, "behind the zebra. That's a weird place to be at midnight, so I'm going to need you to come out and explain yourself." The shape moved. It peeled itself away from the exit door and stepped into the thin light of the hall, and Mira saw that it was a boy. 15 maybe, 16 at the outside. Skinny in the way that said meals were a suggestion, not a schedule. He wore a hoodie 2 sizes too big, the sleeves swallowing his hands so only his fingertips showed, and his sneakers had been white once, in a past life, before they'd walked through whatever this kid had walked through. He looked at her. She looked at him. His eyes were dark and enormous in his thin face, and they held the kind of careful blankness she recognized the way you recognize your own handwriting. Not because it's beautiful, but because you'd know it anywhere. "I wasn't stealing anything," the boy said. "I didn't say you were. I just needed somewhere warm." "Okay. The door wasn't even locked. The alarm thing is broken. Has been for a while, I think." Mira made a mental note to kill Hector from maintenance. The boy's hands were shaking. Not a lot. Just at the fingertips, where the hoodie sleeves ended, a small tremor, like a phone set to vibrate. He was trying to stand the way people stand when they want to look like they're not afraid. Feet apart, chin up, shoulders back. But his body kept betraying the performance. A swallow, a shift of weight, the shaking fingers. She had lived inside that pose. "What's your name?" she asked. "Does it matter?" "It does if I'm deciding whether to call the cops." His chin came up another inch. "Eli." "Eli. Okay, Eli." She picked up the useless flashlight and tucked it back into her belt. The marble was cold under her shoes. The elephants watched from behind their glass, frozen mid-step, going nowhere forever. "How long have you been sleeping in my museum?" The word came out before she caught it. My, not the. She had said my museum, the same way you say my kitchen or my bed, the same way you claim a place that has become the only place where you can breathe without thinking about breathing. Eli noticed. She saw him notice. His eyes moved across her face like he was reading something written in small print. 3 weeks, he said. 3 weeks. 21 nights. She had walked past this boy 21 times without knowing. 21 laps of the West Wing, the East Wing, the basement with its crates of unclassified fossils. And the whole time, a living, breathing, coughing human boy had been folded up behind a fake zebra like a secret the building was keeping from her. She should call it in. That was the protocol. Page the supervisor. File an incident report. Let the police sort it out. A minor, alone, sleeping in a public building. There were systems for this. Processes. Adults in offices who got paid more than $11 an hour to handle exactly this kind of thing. Mira looked at the boy, at his shaking fingers, at the careful blankness in his eyes that she knew was not emptiness, but a door shut so hard the hinges had bent. "Are you hungry?" she said. It was the wrong thing to say. Every rule, every protocol, every page of the employee handbook she'd signed in triplicate said so. She kept peanut butter crackers in the break room. The off-brand kind, 6 to a pack. The cheese-colored ones that tasted like cardboard had made a deal with salt, and both of them had lost. She bought them from the vending machine for 75 cents because they were the cheapest option, and because eating alone at 2 in the morning didn't deserve anything better. Eli ate 4 packs in the time it took Mira to pour a cup of coffee. She didn't watch him eat. That felt like a thing you shouldn't do, like staring at someone crying or reading over someone's shoulder. Hunger like that was private. So she looked at the break room instead. The table with the wobbly leg. The microwave with the burn stain on the inside that nobody claimed. The poster on the wall that said teamwork in big letters above a photo of a rowing crew, as if anyone who worked the night shift at a museum had ever been on a team of any kind. Nobody's taking them. Eli didn't slow down. His jaw worked through the 5th pack with the mechanical focus of a person who had learned to eat fast or eat nothing. He hadn't taken off the hoodie. The break room was warm, the heating doing its job for once, but the hoodie stayed on, the hood still up, like armor he couldn't afford to remove. She understood that too. "Where are you sleeping?" she asked. "Specifically, I need to know my building." There it was again. My building. She let it stand this time. Behind the African section mostly. There's a space between the back of the diorama and the wall. Big enough if you're not big. He looked down at himself. Not big covered it. Sometimes the ocean room, the whale model. There's a gap under the belly where the platform doesn't reach the floor. Mira pictured it. This kid, curled up beneath a fiberglass blue whale, sleeping under 100 tons of something that wasn't real, but looked enough like the real thing to make you forget. There was something in that image that pressed against her chest, a pressure she didn't want to name. The alarm on the east exit has been broken for how long? I don't know. It was broken when I found it. And you just walked in. I just walked in. She was going to kill Hector. She was going to find him, wake him up, and explain to him with great enthusiasm and specific vocabulary that his one job, his singular, only entire job, was to make sure people could not walk into this building after hours. And he had failed at that job so completely that a teenager had set up a small apartment behind a zebra for 3 weeks without anyone noticing. But that was a problem for daylight. Right now, the problem was sitting across from her with cracker crumbs on his chin and eyes that kept cutting to the door like he was measuring the distance. Not because he wanted to leave, because he wanted to know he could. I'm not calling anyone tonight, Mira said. Eli's hand stopped halfway to the 6th pack. The careful blankness shifted. Just a crack, a fissure so small you could miss it if you weren't someone who spent most of her life looking for fissures in her own walls. Why? Because it's 2 in the morning and I haven't finished my rounds, and the overnight supervisor is a man named Dale, who sleeps in his car in the parking lot and only comes inside to use the bathroom. And I don't feel like explaining to Dale why there's a child eating my crackers. I'm not a child. You're eating crackers behind a zebra. That's child behavior. Something happened to Eli's face. A twitch. The left corner of his mouth pulled upward 0.5 centimeter, fought against it, and lost. It wasn't a smile. It was the ghost of a smile, the kind that shows up uninvited and leaves before you can photograph it. Mira felt something warm behind her ribs. She killed it before it could settle. Here's what's going to happen, she said. I'm going to finish my rounds. That takes 2 hours. When I come back, you are going to be in this break room, not behind a zebra, not under a whale, right here in this chair. And then we are going to have a conversation about what comes next. Understood? What if I leave? Then you leave, and I fix the alarm, and you can't come back. That's not much of a choice. Most aren't. She left him there with the crackers and the rowing poster and the microwave that smelled like every sad meal that had ever been heated in it. She walked back into the museum proper, into the dark halls with their glass cases and their frozen animals and their 60-million-year-old silence. And she did her rounds. Floor by floor, room by room, the dinosaurs, the gems, the insect collection, where 1,000 pinned butterflies spread their wings under glass and never flew. She checked doors. She checked windows. She wrote the time in her logbook with the pen that leaked ink onto her fingers, so that by morning her right hand always looked bruised. On the 3rd floor, in the Hall of Human Origins, she stopped. There was a display here she never liked. A reconstruction of an early human, a woman, bent forward, carrying something in her arms. The placard said she was carrying food. But the way the sculptor had shaped her arms, the curve of them, the tightness of the grip, she was carrying something she was afraid to drop. Something she was protecting with her whole body, bent around it like a wall. Mira stood in front of the display. Her reflection ghosted across the glass, overlapping with the stone woman, so for a moment they were the same figure. She thought about the courtroom, the scratch shaped like J, the man 12 feet to her left, who had sat with his hands folded like a person in church, while words were said about what those hands had done. She thought about the boy downstairs, eating crackers with shaking fingers. She thought about the word my museum, my crackers. Like if she claimed enough things, the empty spaces in her would fill with something solid. The stone woman stared forward, with empty carved eyes, carrying, protecting, bent around what mattered. Mira put her hand on the glass. It was cold. Everything in this building was cold, except the break room and the boy in it. She finished her rounds. Eli was in the chair. Same chair, same hoodie. He had folded the empty cracker wrappers into small squares and stacked them in a neat tower on the table. 6 little foil squares, perfectly aligned. The kind of small order a person builds when everything else is chaos. She sat across from him. The table wobbled. Neither of them fixed it. "Who are you running from?" she asked. "Who says I'm running?" "You're sleeping behind a zebra, Eli. People who aren't running sleep in beds." He picked up one of the foil squares, unfolded it, refolded it. A nervous geometry, his fingers finding a task they could control. "Foster family," he said. The words came out flat, rehearsed, like he'd said them to too many clipboards and concerned faces already. "Third one. The dad was—" He stopped, refolded the square. The dad was not great. Not great. 2 words that held a house full of rooms she didn't need to see. Mira felt anger light up in her chest, not for herself, not the old anger with its familiar grooves, but something new and sharp, and aimed at a man she'd never met, who lived in a house she'd never seen, and had made a boy sleep under a whale. "Okay," she said. "Okay what?" "Every social worker I've ever talked to says that. I hear you. Like hearing is doing something." Mira looked at him, at the foil square in his fingers, folded and refolded until the edges were soft. At the careful blankness that was cracking, piece by piece, because anger was making it crack. And anger was easier than the thing underneath it. She knew that too. "You're right," she said. "Hearing isn't doing something. So here's what I'm going to do. You can sleep in the break room tonight. There's a couch in the supervisor's office that Dale doesn't use, because Dale sleeps in his car. I'll get you a blanket from Lost and Found. Tomorrow we figure out the next thing, one thing at a time." "Why are you helping me?" The question landed like a stone in still water. She could have said something about duty, about being a guard, about the oath she took, which wasn't really an oath, just a form she signed that said she wouldn't steal from the gift shop. She could have said something about doing the right thing, about how anyone would do this, about basic human goodness. But she was tired of sentences that weren't true. "Because somebody should have helped me," she said, "and nobody did." The break room hummed with the sound of the old refrigerator working too hard. The fluorescent light above them buzzed at a frequency that felt like it was drilling into the back of her skull. The rowing poster watched them with its frozen enthusiasm. Eli unfolded the foil square one last time, smoothed it flat on the table, looked at it like it was a map to somewhere. "Okay," he said. It was the smallest word. It held everything. 3 nights turned into 7. 7 turned into 12. Mira stopped counting at 12 because counting meant acknowledging that this arrangement had a number, and numbers meant it was a thing that could be measured, and things that could be measured could also end. She found the blanket in Lost and Found, a blue fleece with a stain shaped like Florida on one corner. She brought an extra pillow from her apartment, the flat one she kept on the couch for nights when the bedroom felt too still. She smuggled in food the way spies smuggle documents, zipped inside her jacket, tucked under clipboard stacks, passed through the break room door with the casual confidence of someone who had nothing to hide, and was hiding everything. A loaf of bread and a jar of peanut butter that she replaced every 4 days because the boy ate peanut butter the way the ocean eats shoreline, steady, constant, and without apology. Eli slept on Dale's couch from midnight to 5. At 5, he folded the blanket into a square so precise it looked military, stacked the pillow on top, tucked both behind the filing cabinet where Dale would never look, because Dale had never opened the filing cabinet in the entire recorded history of his employment. Then Eli slipped back into the museum, back behind the diorama or under the whale, or into whatever pocket of space he'd mapped during his weeks of invisible living. And he waited for the day staff to come and go, and then Mira came, and they did it all again. It was, she realized with a distant sort of horror, the closest thing to a routine she'd had in 2 years. She still did her rounds. That part didn't change. 12 hours of walking past dead things in glass boxes, checking doors that were locked, testing windows that were sealed, writing times in a logbook that no one read. But now the rounds had a shape to them, a destination. The break room at the middle of the night, where a boy sat in a hoodie that was starting to smell like the museum, dust and old wood and the faint chemical tang of preservation fluid, and waited for her to come back. They talked. Not about the big things, not at first. At first they talked about the museum. Eli knew it better than she did. 3 weeks of hiding had made him an expert in every corner, every blind spot, every room that the security cameras missed, because the cameras were older than most of the fossils. He knew that the third-floor bathroom had a window that didn't lock. He knew that the gift shop had a motion sensor that triggered if you walked through the center aisle, but not if you stayed along the left wall. He knew that the janitor's closet next to the gem room had a vent that connected to the duct system, and if you pressed your ear to the vent at 6 in the evening, you could hear the tour guides in the main hall finishing their last speech of the day, their voices tinny and far away, like a radio playing in another room of a house you used to live in. "You mapped this whole place," Mira said. It wasn't a question. "Nothing else to do. You could have read a book. There's a whole library on the 4th floor. Natural history, botany, one about rocks that weighs more than you do." "I read that one." She looked at him. He was serious. "The rock book. It's not bad. Did you know there's a mineral called painite? Used to be the rarest mineral on Earth. They named it after the guy who found it. Pain, like the word. That's on the nose. There are only 2 known samples. Both are in museums. So you're saying we might have one?" 3rd floor, back wall, left side of the case. Small one, brownish red. Doesn't look like anything special. That's the thing about rare. It doesn't look the way you think it should. Mira added painite to the growing list of things Eli had taught her about her own building. The list was getting long. She kept it in her head, not on paper, because paper could be found, and questions could be asked, and the whole fragile architecture of this arrangement could come apart like wet cardboard. On night 9, Eli asked about the flashlight. "It doesn't work," he said. He was eating an apple, sitting cross-legged on the break room floor, because the chairs, he said, made his back hurt. "I've watched you carry it every night. You never turn it on. It's broken, so why carry it?" Mira looked at the flashlight on the table. Black, heavy, useless. She had requested a new one twice. Both times, the request had disappeared into the administrative void, where equipment requests went to die. "Because it looks like a flashlight," she said, "and sometimes looking like you have what you need is enough." Eli bit the apple, chewed, thought about it. "That's the saddest thing anyone's ever said to me," he said. "And my social worker once told me I had a lot of potential, while handing me a garbage bag to pack my stuff in." Mira laughed. The sound startled both of them. It came out short and sharp, like a bark, like a thing that had been sleeping in her chest, and woke up disoriented and a little angry about it. She couldn't remember the last time she'd laughed. The realization sat on her like a stone. "Don't do that," Eli said. "Do what?" "Go somewhere. In your head. You do that, you'll be here and then you're not, and your eyes go flat like the animals in the cases." Not because it was cruel. Because it was accurate, in the way that only someone paying very close attention could be accurate. And the idea that this boy had been paying that much attention to her while she thought she was the one watching over him. Rearranged something inside her chest that she wasn't ready to have rearranged. "I'm here," she said. "Okay." "I'm here, Eli." "Okay." Night 11, 2 in the morning. They were in the ocean room, Mira on her rounds, Eli walking with her, because somewhere around night 8 he had started joining her, falling into step beside her like a second shadow, his sneakers quiet on the marble where hers squeaked. The blue whale hung above them, fiberglass and paint and steel cables bolted into the ceiling. 80 feet long, life-size, the placard said. Mira tried to imagine a real one. A real animal that size, moving through water so deep that sunlight gave up trying to reach the bottom. It seemed like the kind of thing the world made once just to prove it could. "I used to sleep under it," Eli said. He was looking up. The whale's belly curved above them, pale and massive. "First week, I didn't know where else to go. I found the gap under the platform, and I fit, and the whale was just there, above me, like a ceiling that was alive. It's not alive. I know, but at night, when the building makes noises, the cables creak a little, and if you're lying under it with your eyes closed, you can pretend." Mira looked at the whale, at the boy beneath it, at the way the emergency lighting caught the curve of the fiberglass and turned it into something that almost breathed. "What were you pretending?" she asked. Eli kept looking up. His hood was down for once. His hair was dark and needed cutting and stuck up at the back in a way that made him look younger than his voice sounded. The careful blankness was there, doing its job, holding the line, that something big was watching over me. The cables creaked. The whale hung. The building breathed its old building breaths of pipe and duct and settling foundation. Mira opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. There were words she could say. Good words, right words, the kind of words that adults say to children when children say things that crack the world open a little. She had heard those words from therapists and counselors and one kind nurse in an emergency room who had held her hand and said things that were true and warm and did not fix a single broken thing. She said none of them. Instead, she reached over and pulled his hood back up over his hair, a small gesture, the kind a person makes without thinking, the way you straighten a picture frame or close a drawer that's been left open. A fixing of something small because the big things were beyond fixing. Eli didn't flinch. That was the thing she noticed. He didn't flinch. "Come on," she said. "Third floor next. I want to see this painite." They walked. The whale watched them go with its painted eye, massive and still, and pretending to be alive in a building full of things pretending to be alive. And the boy walked beside her, and their footsteps made a rhythm on the marble, squeak and silence, squeak and silence all the way to the stairs. The woman from the county showed up on a Tuesday. Mira knew what she was the second she walked through the staff entrance at 8:15 in the morning, just as Mira's shift was ending. She knew by the lanyard, the clipboard, the sensible shoes that said, "I walk into difficult rooms for a living." She knew by the way the woman scanned the lobby, not looking at the dinosaur skeleton or the welcome banner or the gift shop with its stuffed animals and plastic fossils, but looking at the corners, the edges, the places where people hide. Her name was Patricia. She had a last name too, printed on the lanyard, but Mira's eyes wouldn't focus on it, because her heart was running a race her body hadn't signed up for, and every piece of her was being redirected to the single task of standing still and looking normal. "We received a report," Patricia said. She was talking to Gerald, the day manager, a man shaped like a refrigerator who wore ties that were always too short. "A minor, possibly living in the building. We'd like to check the premises." Gerald's face did something complicated. It went through confusion, then concern, then the particular expression of a manager realizing that something has gone wrong on his watch and the paperwork is going to be terrible. "Living in the, I'm sorry, what?" A boy, 15 or 16, one of our foster cases, Elijah Marcus Turner. He's been missing from his placement for almost a month. Elijah Marcus Turner. 3 words that turned a boy behind a zebra into a file, a case number, a problem with a system-approved solution. Mira felt each word land in her stomach, like a coin dropped into deep water. She was standing by the staff lockers, close enough to hear, close enough to see Patricia open her clipboard and show Gerald a photo. A school picture, the kind taken against a blue backdrop, the kind where they tell you to smile, and you do, because the alternative is explaining why you can't. And the smile comes out looking like a door propped open with a stick. Mira had a smile like that. She had a whole collection of them. She walked to the break room. Her feet moved on their own, carrying her through hallways she could navigate blind, past display cases she could describe with her eyes closed, around corners that her body knew the way a river knows its banks. She walked into the break room, and she stood there and she looked at Dale's couch, where the blanket was not visible, because Eli had folded it and hidden it because Eli was careful. Eli was smart. Eli had survived. The pillow was behind the filing cabinet. The peanut butter was in the back of the fridge, behind Gerald's lunch that Gerald never ate. The cracker wrappers were gone because Eli threw them away every night, leaving no trace, existing like a ghost with good manners. Mira's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat on the table. The table wobbled. She pressed harder, as if she could steady it through force, as if steadying a table could steady anything else. She pulled out her phone. She had Eli's number, a prepaid phone she'd bought him on night 10, a cheap thing with a cracked screen protector and 30 minutes of talk time, because the idea of him being unreachable had started to keep her awake during the hours when she was supposed to be sleeping. She texted, "Don't come tonight." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Why? She typed, "Someone is looking for you." The dots stopped. The screen stayed empty for 30 seconds that lasted the entire length of her life. Then, "Are you going to tell them where I am?" The fluorescent light buzzed. The refrigerator hummed its sad mechanical song. The rowing poster crew pulled their oars through frozen water and got nowhere. She typed, "No." She put the phone down, picked it up, put it down again. Her hands would not stop moving. They wanted to fix something, straighten something, fold something into a neat square, the way Eli folded things when the world was too loud and his fingers needed a task. She picked up the flashlight. The useless, broken, carried every night flashlight. She held it in both hands and squeezed until her knuckles went white. And the weight of it, the solid, stupid bulk of it, was the only real thing in the room. Patricia and Gerald were still in the lobby. Mira walked past them. She punched out. She drove home in a car that smelled like peanut butter and museum dust, and the cheap air freshener she hung from the mirror that was supposed to smell like a pine tree, but smelled like the idea of a pine tree as described by someone who had never met one. At home, she sat on her bed, the bed she slept in during the day, with the curtains taped shut against the sun. The bed that was too soft in ways she couldn't explain, so she slept on top of the covers instead of under them, because under felt like too much, like being held by something she hadn't agreed to. She thought about Eli under the whale, pretending something big was watching over him. She thought about the courtroom, the scratch, shaped like J, the way she'd traced it with her thumbnail, while a lawyer asked her to describe in her own words what happened on the night of March 7th. And her own words had failed her so completely that she'd borrowed someone else's. Clinical words, textbook words, words that belonged to a report and not to a body. And the lawyer had nodded, as if those words were enough, as if words could ever be enough for what she was describing. She thought about the boy's file, Elijah Marcus Turner, the foster dad who was not great. She picked up her phone, put it down, picked it up. She called the number she hadn't called in 8 months. It rang 3 times. Each ring was a door she could still close, a hallway she could still back out of, a decision she could still unmake. Her sister answered. Mira? Layla. Are you okay? It's noon, you're supposed to be sleeping. I need help. 8 months of silence. 8 months since Mira had stopped returning calls, stopped answering texts, stopped being a person who existed in her sister's life, because existing in anyone's life meant being seen, and being seen meant being known. And being known meant explaining the things she had no words for that happened on the night of March 7th, that she had already described in someone else's language in a courtroom with a scratch shaped like J. Tell me, Layla said. Mira told her. Not about March 7th, about a boy, a museum, a broken alarm, and a fake zebra, and 3 weeks of hiding, and 12 nights of peanut butter, and a blue whale made of fiberglass, and cables that creaked at night. She told her sister about a flashlight that didn't work, and a guard who carried it anyway. Layla listened. She was good at that. She had always been the one who listened, while Mira was the one who talked. Back when Mira was a person who talked. Back in the before that felt like a country she'd been deported from. You can't keep him in a museum, Layla said. Gentle, like placing something breakable on a table. I know. He needs real help. Help you can't give him in a break room at 2 in the morning. I know that too. What do you want me to do? Mira closed her eyes. The bed was too soft beneath her. The curtains blocked the sun. The apartment was quiet in the way that empty apartments are quiet. Not peaceful, just absent. A space with a person in it instead of a home. You still work at legal aid? Mira asked. I do. Can you find a lawyer? Not a county one, a real one. Someone who will look at Eli's file and see a kid instead of a case number. Another silence. Mira could hear her sister thinking, the way she always could. The way sisters can hear each other think across phone lines at state borders, and 8 months of broken nothing. I can do that, Layla said. One more thing. Yeah? Mira gripped the phone. The too soft bed. The taped curtains. The apartment that was not a home. Can you come here? I know it's far. I know I disappeared. I know that was. The words stacked up like boxes in a doorway. She couldn't get through them. I need someone here who isn't a dead animal behind glass. Layla made a sound. It might have been a laugh. It might have been something else. Something that lives next door to laughing, but pays different rent. I'll be there Thursday, her sister said. Eli didn't come back for 2 nights. Mira did her rounds alone. The museum felt different without him. Not empty, because it was already full of dead things, but emptier in a specific way. The way a room feels after someone leaves, and their warmth is still in the chair, but fading. She walked past the African mammals. The zebra stood in its frozen pose. The gap behind the diorama was dark and bare. She walked past the ocean room. The whale hung in its cables, enormous and still, and the gap under the platform where Eli had slept was just a gap, a dark space between floor and plywood that held nothing but dust and the memory of a boy who had pretended the whale was watching over him. She checked the east exit. The alarm was still broken. She didn't fix it. Maybe it was the same reason she carried the flashlight, because broken things sometimes served a purpose that working things couldn't. On the 3rd night, her phone buzzed. Is the coast clear? Mira typed back, the coast is a museum. It was never clear. A pause. Then, that doesn't answer my question. Nobody is looking for you here tonight. Patricia hadn't come back. Gerald had filed a report saying no evidence of unauthorized entry was found, which was technically true if you didn't count the peanut butter in the fridge and the blanket behind the filing cabinet, and the boy-shaped warmth that still lived in the cushions of Dale's couch. Eli appeared at midnight. He came through the east exit, quiet, his sneakers making no sound on the marble, his hoodie up, his hands deep in his pockets. He stood in the doorway of the break room and looked at Mira, and she looked at him, and neither of them said anything for a long time. because sometimes the space between people holds more than words can. I stayed at the library during the day, he said. They have outlets. I charge the phone. Good. I slept in the park one night, under the bridge by the softball field. The words hit her chest like a fist. Under a bridge. A 15-year-old boy, alone, under a bridge, because the systems designed to catch him had the same basic competency as a broken alarm on an emergency exit. You're not sleeping under a bridge again, Mira said. You can't promise that. Watch me. Eli sat down. He looked at the table, at the spot where his tower of foil squares had stood, and his fingers moved to the edge of his sleeve and started folding the fabric, working it between his thumb and forefinger, in that small nervous motion she had come to recognize, the way she recognized the sound of her own shoes on marble. My sister is coming, Mira said. Tomorrow. Eli's fingers stopped. You have a sister? I have a sister. Her name is Layla. She works at Legal Aid. She knows people, lawyers, the kind who fight for kids instead of filing them. I don't need a lawyer. Everyone needs a lawyer. That's the first thing they don't teach you. What's the second thing? That the systems that are supposed to help you are run by people who are tired and underpaid and doing their best. And their best is sometimes not enough. And that's not your fault, but it is your problem. The careful blankness was thinner now than it had been that first night. 12 nights of peanut butter and conversation and walking rounds together through a building full of preserved things had worn grooves in it, the way water wears grooves in stone, not by force, but by showing up, again and again, in the same place. Why do you work here? He asked. $11 an hour and a flashlight. That's not an answer. It's the one I have. Eli leaned back in the chair, looked at the ceiling. The fluorescent tube buzzed its eternal buzz. You're hiding too, he said. You know that, right? You come here at night and walk through empty rooms, and you don't talk to anyone, and you carry a flashlight that doesn't work, and you pretend that's a life. That's the same thing I was doing behind the zebra, just with a paycheck. The break room was very quiet. The refrigerator compressor kicked on. The rowing poster watched with its frozen team spirit. Mira's hands were on the table, palms down, pressing, and the table wobbled under them, because the table would always wobble, and pressing harder would never fix it. She wanted to be angry. Anger was the tool she reached for, the familiar thing, the coat she put on when the cold got too close. But the anger wouldn't come. It sat in its usual place in her chest and refused to light. Like a match struck too many times, the phosphorus worn down to nothing. What came instead was something she didn't have a word for. Not sadness, not relief, something between the two. A feeling like stepping off a ledge and finding out the ground was only an inch below your foot the whole time. Yeah, she said, I know. Layla arrived on Thursday. She looked like Mira but softer. Same dark hair, same sharp jaw, but with a face that hadn't learned to hold itself still the way Mira's had. She stood in the lobby of the museum during visiting hours and looked up at the dinosaur skeleton and said, You work here? In a building full of bones? Mira, come on. The bones are the least weird part. What's the most weird part? The teenager living behind the zebra. Layla met Eli that night. She brought food, real food, containers of rice and chicken and roasted vegetables, the kind of food that comes from a kitchen where someone stood and stirred and tasted and cared. Eli ate with the same mechanical speed, but Mira saw his eyes close for a second on the first bite, a small surrender, and she had to look at the rowing poster for a while after that. Layla had found a lawyer, a woman named Diane, who specialized in foster care cases, and had, according to Layla, the gentle warmth of a schoolteacher and the courtroom presence of a woman who had once made a judge cry. She can file an emergency petition, Layla said. Get Eli into a new placement. A real one, vetted, reviewed, Not a house with a dad who's not great. Eli was quiet. He sat with his food and his folded sleeve and his dark, enormous eyes, and he listened the way people listen when other people are making plans about their life. Present, but separate. There, but somewhere else. Hearing the words, but also hearing the space between them where the real question lived. "What if the new one is the same?" he said. Nobody answered right away. The break room held the question the way the museum held its bones, carefully, in a case, under glass, preserved but not alive. "It might be," Mira said. Layla looked at her. Eli looked at her. The honesty of it sat in the room like a third person. "It might be the same. It might be worse. It might be better. I can't promise you a good thing, because I stopped believing in promises somewhere around the time a man with folded hands sat in a courtroom, and—" She stopped. The words hit a wall she didn't know was there. Or she did know. She always knew. The wall was the same wall it had always been, built one brick at a time from every night she didn't sleep, and every phone call she didn't return, and every time she walked these marble halls at 2 in the morning, carrying a flashlight that didn't work, pretending that was living. Eli reached across the table. His fingers, the ones that shook, the ones that folded foil into squares, the ones that lived at the edge of a too big sleeve, touched the back of her hand. A light touch, brief, the kind of touch that asked permission by being so small you could pretend it didn't happen. Mira didn't flinch. That was the thing she noticed. She didn't flinch. "Okay," Eli said. "Call the lawyer." Mira looked at her hand on the table, at his hand pulling back to his sleeve, at her sister sitting across from them with eyes that were wet and careful, at the break room with its wobbling table and its rowing poster, and its buzzing light and its sadness and its warmth. She looked at the flashlight on her belt. Black, heavy, broken. She unclipped it, set it on the table, pushed it to the side. It rolled to the edge and stopped, balanced there, not falling, not fixed, just resting in the space between what it was and what it was supposed to be. "I'll call her now," Mira said. She picked up the phone. She dialed. The break room was quiet. The whale hung in its cables on the floor below them, enormous and impossible and pretending to be alive. And somewhere in the building, a boy had slept beneath it. And somewhere in the city, a woman was about to answer a phone. And somewhere in this room, a guard was letting go of a flashlight for the first time in 2 years. Diane answered on the second ring. Mira opened her mouth, found her own words this time, not borrowed ones, not clinical ones, not the ones she'd used in a courtroom while staring at a scratch shaped like J, her own.